Kaylee Turner, the evidence is clear. You showed no remorse for your actions. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without parole.
Life in prison? You can't do that to me. I'm just a teenager. That's a joke, right?
On October 8, 2023, a shocking case out of Fresno, California, made national headlines after a 17-year-old girl, identified as Kylie Turner, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the death of her girlfriend's 6-year-old son. According to police reports, emergency services were called to an apartment complex on West Barstow Avenue just after 9:40 p.m. Following a report of a child found unresponsive, paramedics discovered the young boy with severe blunt force injuries to the head and torso. Despite attempts to revive him, he was pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives say the boy's mother, 25-year-old Jasmine Lewis, had left her son in Kaylee's care while she went to work a late shift. When she returned home, she found the child lying motionless on the floor. Kaylee, acting calm and dismissive, body cam footage later revealed Kaylee telling officers he fell. "I told him to stop crying." But the coroner's report told a different story. The child suffered multiple internal injuries inconsistent with a fall, including fractured ribs, a ruptured spleen, and facial bruising. Investigators determined the boy had been beaten for several minutes before he collapsed. Neighbors later testified they had heard loud thuds and crying from the apartment earlier that evening. One witness told reporters, "We thought it was just another argument. We had no idea a child was being hurt." When detectives confronted Kaylee with the evidence, she reportedly smirked and said, "You can't arrest me. I'm a minor." Police described her attitude as cold and arrogant. She was taken into custody without incident, booked into the Fresno County Juvenile Detention Center on suspicion of homicide and child abuse resulting in death. As news spread, the case sparked outrage across California. Social media quickly labeled her the teenage Karen, a reference to her defiant behavior captured on police body cam. Prosecutors announced they would seek to have her tried as an adult, citing the brutality of the attack and her complete lack of remorse. In a statement to the press, District Attorney Michael Reed said, "This was not a moment of anger. This was sustained deliberate violence against a defenseless child. The suspect showed no emotion, no regret, and no sense of responsibility." Court documents revealed disturbing details, including text messages sent by Kaylee to a friend shortly before the attack. One message read, "That kid's annoying, I wish he'd just shut up." Hours later, the boy was dead. As the investigation continued, prosecutors gathered more evidence: a torn pillowcase stained with blood, the child's toy cracked in half, and Kaylee's fingerprints on a broken hairbrush handle believed to have been used in the assault. By late October, the case was formally transferred to Fresno Superior Court, where Kaylee appeared for the first time in an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed at her waist. Reporters in the gallery noted she rolled her eyes as the charges were read. When asked if she understood the allegations, she said flatly, "Yeah, whatever." The courtroom was silent. The victim's grandmother wept openly in the front row. The judge warned Kaylee to show respect, but she only smirked. The moment quickly went viral, shared across TikTok and YouTube under the headline, "Teenage Girl Laughs During Murder Hearing." As the hearing adjourned, the prosecutor told the media the trial would begin in early 2024, and that the state would pursue the maximum penalty under California law. What no one expected was that during sentencing months later, this same girl who once mocked the system would finally break down in tears as the judge delivered his final words. The trial of 17-year-old Kaylee Turner began on March 4, 2024, inside Fresno County Superior Court, drawing intense media attention from across California for weeks leading up to it. News outlets replayed clips from her initial hearing, her smirk, her dismissive attitude, and the viral moment where she said, "You can't arrest me, I'm just a teenager." But inside the courtroom, things were far more serious. Prosecutors laid out a case that painted a disturbing picture of cruelty and control. Assistant District Attorney Michael Reed stood before the jury. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act of rage, a child beaten to death by someone who believed she could get away with it. According to the prosecution's timeline, the attack occurred between 8:30 p.m. and 9:15 p.m. on October 8, 2023. Evidence technicians presented photos from the crime scene, overturned furniture, a shattered picture frame, and blood droplets leading from the living room to the kitchen. The coroner, Dr. Melissa Grant, testified that the 6-year-old suffered multiple blunt force trauma injuries inconsistent with any accidental fall. She described internal bleeding, deep bruising, and a ruptured spleen. When shown the autopsy photos, jurors turned away in visible discomfort. Prosecutors also introduced digital evidence, text messages, and social media posts recovered from Kaylee's phone. In one exchange, sent less than an hour before the attack, she wrote to a friend, "He's screaming again. I'm gonna lose it." The friend responded, "Just ignore him." Kaylee's final reply read, "Can't, I'll make him stop." Detectives also presented CCTV footage showing Kaylee leaving the apartment complex shortly after 9:30 p.m., walking calmly down the sidewalk with a hoodie pulled over her head. Less than 10 minutes later, Jasmine Lewis arrived home to find her son motionless on the floor. When the defense took the floor, attorney Rebecca Collins argued that Kaylee had not intended to kill the child. The death was a tragic accident made worse by stress, immaturity, and poor impulse control. Kaylee was a teenager struggling with anger and abandonment, Collins said. This was not murder, it was a terrible mistake. But the prosecution countered by showing Kaylee's interview video from the night of her arrest. In it, she appeared emotionless, sipping from a bottle of water as detectives confronted her with the evidence. "Detective, you hit him more than once, didn't you?" "Kaylee, he wouldn't stop crying." "Detective, do you understand he's dead?" Kaylee shrugs. "Guess he should have listened." That statement stunned the courtroom. Gasps echoed through the gallery. One juror reportedly wiped tears from her face as "Chirpy clip ended." The following day, Jasmine Lewis, the victim's mother, took the stand. Her voice shook as she recounted the moment she discovered her son's body. "He was so small," she said, holding back tears. "I trusted her with him. I never thought she'd hurt him." During cross-examination, the defense tried to suggest that Jasmine had left her child in an unsafe environment, but the judge quickly sustained objections, reminding the jury that Kaylee was the only one on trial. Over the next several days, witnesses described Kaylee's growing resentment toward the boy. One neighbor testified she had heard Kaylee yelling, "You ruin everything." During previous arguments, another said, Kaylee once threatened to teach him a lesson after he spilled juice on her phone. By the end of the second week, the evidence had built a consistent and disturbing narrative. The volatile teenager who lost control and then tried to downplay her crime. When Kaylee took the stand in her own defense, her tone was cold and detached. She said she didn't mean for him to die, but admitted she got angry. When asked by the prosecutor why she didn't call 911, she replied, "I didn't think it was that bad, he was still breathing." The courtroom fell silent again. Even her attorney looked shaken. By March 19, 2024, after 2 weeks of testimony and over 30 witnesses, both sides rested their cases. The prosecution asked the jury to convict on second-degree murder while the defense pleaded for involuntary manslaughter, arguing that Kaylee's youth clouded her judgment. Before the jury was dismissed, the prosecutor gave his final statement. "Being young is not a license to kill," she laughed. She bragged she dismissed it all until now. But justice isn't about age, it's about accountability. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, some calling for justice, others holding signs about juvenile reform. Inside, 12 jurors prepared to decide the fate of a teenager who thought she could not be touched by the law. Next came the verdict, and for the first time since her arrest, Kaylee Turner would finally show emotion. On March 22, 2024, the courtroom was packed to capacity. Cameras lined the back wall, officers filled every corner, and the air was tense. After nearly 8 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Kaylee sat motionless, hands cuffed, trying to look confident, but when the foreperson stood to read the verdict, her eyes began to flicker. "On the charge of second-degree murder," the foreperson said, "we find the defendant, Kaylee Turner, guilty." The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, others applauded quietly before the judge demanded silence. Kaylee's expression shifted instantly. The arrogance that once filled her face vanished. She shook her head, whispering, "No, that's not possible." Her attorney placed a hand on her shoulder, but she pulled away, muttering under her breath, They can't do this to me. The judge called for order and turned his attention to her. Miss Turner, he said firmly, you have been found guilty by a jury of your peers. This court will now proceed to sentencing. Kaylee stood trembling. I didn't mean it, she shouted. It was an accident. But the judge continued, voice steady. The evidence presented in this courtroom tells a different story. Your lack of remorse, your actions, and your words show no understanding of the life you took. Then came the sentence. You are hereby sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The words hit her like a blow. Her knees buckled and she began to cry, real tears for the first time since her arrest. Please, I'm just a kid, she screamed as deputies stepped forward to take her away. Reporters shouted questions, flashes filled the room, and the mother of the victim sobbed quietly in the front row. As Kaylee was led out in handcuffs, she turned back toward the crowd, her voice breaking. I didn't think they'd actually lock me up forever, but no one replied. The door closed behind her, leaving only the sound of the judge's gavel and the silence of a courtroom where justice had finally been served. Outside, reporters described the moment as one of the most emotional trials the city had ever seen. What began as arrogance ended in tears, and a chilling reminder that no one, not even a teenager, is above the law. The day after the sentencing, the news of Kaylee Turner's life imprisonment dominated every major outlet across the country. Headlines read teen, killer sentenced to life, no remorse, no mercy. Social media exploded with divided opinions. Some said she was too young for a life sentence. Others believed justice had finally been served. Videos of her mocking the police during her arrest resurfaced online, sparking outrage. She thought it was a game, one commenter wrote. Now she's realizing what real life looks like behind bars. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, some holding photos of the victim. 7-year-old Eli Parker, whose innocent smile had been shown on screens for months. His mother, still grieving, spoke to reporters through tears. All I ever wanted was justice for my baby. No sentence will bring him back, but at least now she can't hurt anyone else. As the coverage continued, more details from the investigation began to surface. Police sources revealed that when they first arrived at the crime scene back on October 8, 2023, they found Eli's body wrapped in a blanket near the back door of the house. Kaylee had initially told officers the child fell down the stairs, but forensic investigators quickly proved otherwise. The bruises, broken ribs, and internal bleeding told a story of repeated assaults over time. Detective Harris Collins, who led the case, described it as one of the most disturbing investigations of his career. What shocked us most wasn't just the brutality, he said, but how calm she was when we questioned her. She didn't cry, she didn't panic, she just smirked. That same smirk would later be played for the jury, a clip that many said sealed her fate. At Greenvale Correctional Facility, where she began serving her sentence, reports described Kaylee as quiet and withdrawn. Prison officials said she spends most of her days in isolation, rarely speaking to anyone. One guard mentioned she had broken down during her first night inside, crying uncontrollably after lights out. Reality hit her hard, the officer said. She kept saying, I didn't mean to do it, I didn't mean to. Meanwhile, Eli's family has struggled to rebuild their lives. His mother has since become an advocate for child protection laws, campaigning for stricter background checks and harsher penalties for offenders who harm minors. No child should suffer the way my son did, she said in an interview, and no parent should have to bury their child. The case of teenage Karen, as the media called her, became a cautionary tale that spread far beyond the courtroom. Teachers began discussing it in classrooms, psychologists analyzed it on talk shows, and legal experts debated whether the justice system should treat violent teens as adults. In the end, Kaylee's case stood as a grim reminder of how arrogance, anger, and cruelty can destroy lives in an instant. A teenager who once thought she couldn't be touched by the law now wakes up every morning behind concrete walls, wearing the same orange jumpsuit she once mocked. The final words from the judge during sentencing still echo in public memory. You believed your age made you untouchable, but justice is blind to pride and privilege. The life you took was innocent, and for that your freedom is gone. Kaylee Turner will spend the rest of her life behind bars, while Eli Parker's name lives on as a symbol of justice finally served. The town of Clearwater will never forget October 8, 2023, the day a teenage girl, as cruelty met the full weight of the law,